Lost American. Final thoughts on Unrestricted Warfare. I started reading Unrestricted Warfare a few months ago to get a better understanding of the two Chinese colonels who wrote it, as well as what they envisioned the future of warfare could be like. I have to say that overall the book was worth reading. Now, what I want to do is sum up some main points that were brought up in the last few chapters. One of the biggest concepts in this book was the idea that one can no longer think of war as occurring on the battlefield. Wars from the mid part of the 20th century onward have really shown that the battlefield can be anywhere. It does not need to be a physical battlefield, but can occur in cyberspace, in psychological operations, or in a financial attack. The list, in some ways, is endless. These different battlefields can be combined to form a strategy of how you will break your opponent. Another big takeaway is that wars may not be fought by nation states in the future. It could occur through terrorist groups, non-governmental organizations, or supranational organizations, just to name a few. Anyone who examines 9/11 can quickly identify this. 9/11 happened because a multinational terrorist group carried out the attacks. As far as we know, it was not backed or led by any one nation state. The US did attempt to make the argument that Saddam may have had a role in it, but that idea crumbled. Sometime shortly after 9/11, I remember hearing a quote that goes like this: "The 9/11 terrorists did more damage to the US on that day than the Soviet Union did in 50 years of the Cold War." I'm not sure how true that quote is, but I've heard it many times over the years. Think of one disgruntled hacker who works for a big bank and the damage that they could do if they wanted to. The time of nation states invading each other may be coming to an end. Of course, I say that now that Russia has invaded Ukraine, and I see more and more articles about China planning to invade Taiwan. So I think the jury may still be out on that point. The two above points, that war can occur on multiple fronts and that it may not just be through nation states, are two huge takeaways. Yet, I bet some of my friends would argue with me that a terrorist group could never bring down the US, or that a transnational terrorist group could threaten any nation state. They just aren't organized enough, they would argue. Towards the end of the book, the authors mention the example of when Al Qaeda bombed the World Trade Center for the first time in 1993. They write, "Bin Laden and bombing of the WTC used a truckload of bombs and threatened U.S. interests on a strategic level. Meanwhile, to attack bin Laden, the U.S. could only use tactical retaliation. We attempted to get back at bin Laden by firing cruise missiles into sites where it was believed he was present." Think about this for a moment. A terrorist group can do a small attack on a nation state that doesn't cost it that much, but could do a massive strategic damage to it. Yet the nation state may not really be able to hit back at the terrorist group, especially if it's not well known. At the end of the book, the authors stress that war has not faded away. It will always be with us. Only the dead have seen the war, according to Plato, or maybe more accurately to say General MacArthur. The boundaries between soldier and non-soldier have broken down. I understand that some people may claim that war will always involve non-soldiers, meaning civilians. That is true. If a village was raided, women, children, and the elderly all suffered and or died. Instead, think of it more as people who have no military training can now do incredible damage to other people. One example is a hacker who hacks a power plant to bring it down, or even on a much smaller scale, the Unabomber. In these videos, I also talked about 4th generation warfare. Maybe, one day, I'll make a video series talking about 4th generation warfare, and it'll focus a lot on people attacking it. Now, I think there's one general rule about warfare. That's that both sides want to win it, and they will do almost anything to win. War changes, but a lot of it stays the same. Currently, as I write this, the war in Ukraine is still raging. Recently, there was an article in The Economist entitled, "What is the war in Ukraine teaching Western armies?" This article argued that it's not been drones, the javelin, or other modern weapons that keeps the Ukrainian army going. Instead, it's the old king of battle, artillery, that keeps the Ukrainian army going for the first 6 months of the war. The article states, "What blunted the Russians north of Kiev was 2 brigades of artillery firing all their barrels every day. The pivotal role of artillery is a sobering thought for Western European armies, whose firepower has dwindled dramatically since the end of the Cold War. From 1990 to 2020, the number of artillery pieces among large European armies declined by 57%, according to a tally by the International Institute for Strategic Studies, another think tank in London. This study, from the Royal United Services Institute in the UK argues that it was mainly traditional artillery that really turned the tide of the battle for the Ukrainians. Again, this study is only for the first 6 months of the war. Drones did play a role, but more for intelligence gathering than anything. The lifespan for a drone, according to the study, was only a few days, and thus an army needs a lot more drones than it thinks it may need. In war, both sides want to win, but one has to understand their opponent, both their strengths and weaknesses. You must look at your enemy as if they want to destroy you and think about the best way to bring them down. There is one small tangent that I want to say at this point that I've been thinking as I made my way through this book. Let's say I was a senior military leader in China and have a plan to bring down the US. My plan starts with using social media to further split the American population. Then, after a few years of this, I start a massive financial war. Then, after that, hit the US with an EMP. After all that, I invade the country. Now, I don't think such a plan would ever be implemented but my point is that I don't think a terrorist or a state or terrorist group would come out with such a complex plan as if they were playing some type of 3D chess. I could see a financial war that moves into a hot war. I can also see that the financial war has no intention at the start to go into a hot war. If it does, it could be by complete accident. In the end, warfare in the future is not going to be lasers and lightsabers. Instead, it will be a lot like the stuff we've seen in the past with technology helping to aid it. I do expect that civilians will be more involved. Whether that means they'll die, have their bank account zeroed out, or face some other issue, I don't know. And with that, I'll stop.